The galaxy had known conflict for as long as anyone could remember. Entire empires had risen, expanded, and collapsed under the weight of battles that never seemed to end. To the younger races, war was not just common, it was natural. It was the way of the stars. Two massive alliances stood at the center of it all. On one side was the Orani League, a proud coalition that believed in order above all else. On the other side was the Draven Union, a loose gathering of powerful worlds that valued freedom and strength. Their goals clashed in every way, and neither could allow the other to grow too powerful. For centuries, they had fought across the galaxy. Worlds turned to ash. Cities once filled with light became silent husks. Entire generations grew up never knowing peace. Soldiers were born, trained, and sent to battle before they had even seen more than a handful of seasons. To live under one of the alliances meant always watching the sky, waiting for ships to arrive, either to defend or to conquer. And yet, despite all this destruction, neither side could truly win. The Orani League built fleets of shining warships, each one crafted with precision and discipline. The Draven Union countered with swarms of rugged vessels that valued raw power and speed. Battles raged for decades, but every victory was soon balanced by a defeat. The galaxy called it the Endless War. The strange thing was how normal it all seemed. For the Orani, war was duty. For the Draven, war was proof of strength. Even the smaller nations caught between them accepted it. To them, there would always be conflict, and all they could do was pick a side or try to hide in the shadows. Peace was a dream, but no one believed in it anymore. In the great halls of the Orani League, leaders spoke of strategy with voices as calm as if they were discussing the weather. They measured lives in numbers, not names. They built weapons that could level planets, not to frighten the Union, but to maintain balance. In their eyes, stability mattered more than mercy. Across the stars, the Draven Union thrived on chaos. They taught their children that to fight was to live. To hesitate was to lose. Strength was celebrated, and every victory was sung as proof that their way was the true way. Even when they lost, they claimed the struggle itself made them greater. For those caught in between, life was a quiet struggle to survive. Neutral planets traded with both sides, pretending to be loyal to one while offering resources to the other. Some systems became hiding places for refugees, while others were stripped bare to fuel the machines of war. Ordinary people hoped only to see another sun rise, no matter which flag flew above their homes. To outside observers, if there were any left, the galaxy looked locked in a cycle without end. The alliances had fought so long that they no longer asked why. The reason was forgotten. The goal was forgotten. Only the fight remained. The leaders of both factions had long stopped searching for peace. For them, war had become part of identity, part of existence. They believed that only through endless struggle could they prove their worth. And so, fleets were built, soldiers were trained, and the battles continued. Yet even in this dark rhythm, whispers began to rise. Some younger voices in the league asked, quietly, if order was worth so much pain. Some within the Union wondered if strength meant anything when their homes were always in ruins. But these voices were faint, drowned out by the clash of weapons and the speeches of commanders who promised glory in the next campaign. The galaxy drifted on, weary but unchanging. And then came the humans. No one noticed them at first. They were a small species, tucked away in a corner of space far from the grand battle lines. Their ships were not vast like the fleets of the League. Their weapons were not terrifying like those of the Union. Compared to the giants of the war, humans seemed like little more than children, curious and fragile. But what no one knew, not yet, was that humans carried something the galaxy had almost forgotten. Something neither side had ever taken seriously. It was not a weapon or a fleet. It was not power or numbers. It was something far simpler and far stronger. It was the idea that the war did not have to last forever. And soon, the galaxy would learn that even the smallest voice can change the loudest storm. The humans did not enter the galaxy with great power or with loud announcements. They came quietly, their ships moving like travelers more than conquerors. To the Orani League and the Draven Union, they seemed too small to matter. In a universe filled with massive fleets and ancient empires, who would notice a young species that had only recently reached the stars? Human ships were simple compared to the shining vessels of the Orani and the massive warcraft of the Draven. Their engines were not the fastest, their shields not the strongest. But humans carried something that many others did not. They carried curiosity. They wanted to learn. They wanted to explore. Where other species saw danger and stayed away, humans saw mystery and moved closer. The first time humans entered the records of the wider galaxy, they were mistaken for traders. A small fleet arrived at a neutral station that floated between the territories of the two alliances. The station was known as a place where deals were made in secret. The humans came not to sell weapons or to bargain for power. They came with food, medicine, and tools, offering them freely to those who needed help. The station dwellers were confused. They asked what the humans wanted in return. The humans simply said they wished to share, to learn, and to build friendships. Many laughed at them. Some thought they were hiding a deeper plan. But the humans kept offering help, and soon those in need accepted it. At first, neither the Orani nor the Draven cared. A young species giving out supplies was not worth attention. Both sides were too busy with their war. But slowly, reports reached their councils. Whispers began to spread of a people who traveled without conquest, who entered war zones not with armies but with aid. The Orani dismissed the reports as weakness. They said no species could survive in the galaxy with such behavior. To them, humans were soft and would soon be swallowed by the storm of war. The Draven scoffed as well, claiming humans lacked the courage to fight and therefore had no right to stand among the stars. Still, the humans continued. They did not claim territories. They did not build fortresses. Instead, they sent their small fleets to where the war had left the deepest scars. They entered burned-out worlds and stations on the edge of collapse. Where the League and the Union had taken, the humans gave. Where the empires had destroyed, the humans rebuilt, even in small ways. The galaxy had never seen such actions before. It was not the way of the stars. For most species, to rise meant to conquer. To grow meant to fight. But humans did not seem to follow these rules. They moved with a different purpose, one that others could not yet understand. It was during one of these journeys that humans caught true notice for the first time. A large battle had torn through a mining system, leaving its stations in ruins. Survivors from both alliances hid in the wreckage, starving and waiting for rescue that never came. Neither side could risk sending aid, for fear the enemy would strike again. Into this silence came a small group of human ships. They carried no heavy weapons, no great armies. Instead, they carried food, water, and shelter. They opened their doors to survivors, no matter their flag. Soldiers of the Orani League and the Draven Union, who had once sworn to destroy each other, now found themselves sharing the same decks under human protection. At first there was anger. Old enemies glared across the narrow halls of human ships. But the humans treated them all the same. They gave food with no judgment, medicine with no questions, and space to rest with no demand for loyalty. The soldiers could not understand it. For their whole lives, they had been told the other side was less than them, an enemy to be hated. Yet here were humans showing kindness without concern for old wars. The survivors carried these stories back when they were returned to their people. Commanders of both sides dismissed the tales, calling them weak inventions. But the soldiers knew what they had seen. Whispers began to spread through both fleets, carried by those who had been rescued. They spoke of humans who valued life over power, who treated strangers as friends. The leaders did not yet fear humans. They saw them as too small to matter. But the truth was already beginning to take shape. Humans had entered the galaxy unnoticed, but they were planting something new wherever they went. It was not technology or weapons. It was an idea, and ideas are harder to destroy than ships. In time, the galaxy would realize that these quiet arrivals, dismissed by many, carried within them a force that could change everything. For now, the humans kept moving from place to place, never claiming land, never demanding tribute. They traveled like wandering sparks through the darkness of war. And though no one admitted it yet, those sparks were beginning to catch fire. The war between the Orani League and the Draven Union had gone on for so long that every battle looked the same. Fleets clashed with predictable moves. The League used strict formations, their ships flying like pieces on a chessboard. The Union relied on speed and power, rushing forward with great force. Both sides knew the other's methods, and both sides had become locked in endless repetition. Then came the humans with a way of thinking no one expected. Human fleets were small, so they could not fight with numbers. Their ships were not the strongest, so they could not endure endless fire. Instead, they chose to be clever. They studied their enemies, not to copy them, but to surprise them. Humans did not follow patterns. They shifted, adapted, and improvised in the middle of battle. To the Orani and Draven, their moves looked strange, even foolish. Yet somehow, those strange moves worked. In one of the first battles where humans dared to intervene, the Orani League was pushing deep into a Union-controlled system. The Union had set a trap, placing hidden ships around the star to strike from all sides. Normally, the trap would have destroyed the invaders. But humans noticed the pattern of energy around the system. They saw the faint signs of the hidden ships. Instead of warning the League or the Union, they created a plan that shocked both sides. The humans sent out small decoy vessels, each carrying bright signal flares. They launched the flares in random directions, confusing the hidden ships. Believing they had been discovered, the Union fleet fired too early, revealing their positions. The League capitalized on the mistake and escaped the trap, though they never understood how it happened. Both alliances later learned it was the humans who had acted, not for one side, but to prevent needless destruction of the system's civilian stations. This was how humans fought. Not with grand fleets or powerful weapons, but with creativity. They did not always take sides. Sometimes they helped one alliance, sometimes the other, and sometimes neither. Their true goal was not victory in battle but survival, rescue, and balance. They wanted to limit the endless harm caused by the Great War. At first, the larger empires thought this was a trick. How could a small species believe they could step into battles between giants and make a difference? Yet the results could not be denied. Time after time, human strategies turned disasters into stalemates, or stalemates into moments of safety for the innocent. One reason for this success was the way humans thought of conflict. For the Orani, battles were about strict order. For the Draven, battles were about strength. For humans, battles were about possibility. They looked for opportunities in places others ignored. A drifting asteroid could become cover. A broken station could become a shield. Even the timing of a solar flare could be used to blind enemy sensors. Nothing was too small or unimportant in human eyes. Another reason was trust. Human crews placed great faith in one another. Captains listened to engineers, pilots listened to medics, and every voice mattered when quick thinking was needed. While Orani commanders relied only on perfect discipline, and Draven captains relied only on bold strength, humans relied on each other. That unity gave them speed and creativity. Decisions were made in moments, not after long chains of command. Still, not everyone saw humans in a positive light. Some Orani leaders whispered that humans were reckless. Some Draven commanders claimed they were cowards who avoided true battle. Yet even as the powerful mocked them, soldiers on the ground and travelers among the stars began to tell stories. Stories of humans who appeared when no one else would, who saved lives with ideas instead of overwhelming force. One such story spread quickly after a clash near the border of both alliances. A great battle had left dozens of ships stranded without power. The Orani and Draven vessels floated side by side, their crews waiting for rescue that would never come. Into that wreckage arrived a handful of human ships. Instead of choosing which side to aid, they extended cables to every vessel they could reach. They shared power, repaired systems, and guided the stranded ships to safety. When questioned afterward, the human captain said only that no one should be left to drift alone in the dark. That simple statement was repeated in quiet voices across both alliances. For many, it was the first time they had heard such words from a starfaring people. The Orani and the Draven still fought, and the humans remained too small to change the tide of war. Yet everywhere they went, they showed another way to think, another way to act. Their strategies were not just clever tricks in battle. They were lessons, seeds planted in minds that had long accepted war as the only truth. And though the great empires still laughed at them, the galaxy itself was beginning to listen. The war burned on, spreading from system to system like fire across dry fields. Battles left planets scarred and stations broken, yet both the Orani League and the Draven Union refused to stop. Victory always seemed close, then slipped away. Loss always seemed heavy, yet never heavy enough to bring surrender. In one small corner of the galaxy lay a world called Maras. It was not rich in resources, nor was it a center of trade. But it was home to millions of civilians, both Orani and Draven, who had settled there long before the war lines were drawn. The planet had farms, lakes, and quiet cities. For decades, it had survived untouched, a fragile place of peace. That peace ended when both alliances turned their eyes toward Maras. Its location made it valuable as a supply post. Neither side cared about the people. To the Orani, the planet was a point on a map. To the Draven, it was a step toward pushing the League back. Both prepared fleets to claim it, and the people of Maras could do nothing but wait for destruction to fall from the sky. The battle began with fire. Orani warships entered orbit, forming their tight formations. Draven fleets arrived soon after, charging with speed and power. The sky above Maras lit with beams and explosions. Fragments of ships rained down, burning through the atmosphere. On the ground, cities shook as the air grew thick with fear. The humans arrived not to fight, but to save. A small group of their ships slipped into the chaos, unnoticed at first. They had no hope of matching the power of the great fleets. Yet they carried something more important than weapons. They carried resolve. Human captains gave a single order. Every ship was to focus on rescue. They lowered shuttles to the surface, pulling civilians from collapsing cities. They extended docking bays to damaged vessels, bringing aboard survivors from both sides. Orani citizens, Dravan citizens, even soldiers who had lost their ships, all were taken in. The humans asked no questions, made no demands. To them, every life mattered. At first, the rescued fought among themselves. Orani soldiers glared at Dravan warriors, and Dravan citizens shouted at Orani families. Old hate was not easy to silence. Yet the humans treated them all with the same care. Food was shared evenly. Medics moved from one patient to the next without hesitation. Children from both sides were given the same blankets, the same comfort. Slowly, the anger began to weaken. On one human vessel, an Orani officer and a Dravan pilot were placed in the same recovery room. Both had been injured, both too weak to argue. They watched as a human medic worked tirelessly to heal them, speaking in calm tones. The officer asked why the medic would waste time on an enemy. The medic replied, "You are not enemies here. You are lives worth saving." Those words sank deeper than any blade. As the battle raged above, the human fleet worked below. They guided civilians to safe zones, shielded shelters with their own bodies, and refused to abandon anyone they could reach. Their ships took damage, yet they did not retreat. They stayed until the last shuttle had lifted the last family. When the fleets of the Orani and Dravan finally noticed what was happening, they were too late to stop it. Thousands of civilians and soldiers were already in human hands. The two alliances had fought each other to a standstill, neither side gaining ground. Yet the humans had gained something greater. They had earned the trust of those they saved. News spread quickly after the battle. Survivors carried their stories across the stars. They spoke of humans who entered a firestorm not for conquest, but for protection. They spoke of ships where enemies sat side by side, kept alive by the same hands. They spoke of words that no one else in the galaxy dared to say, that every life had value, no matter the flag. The leaders of the Orani League dismissed these stories as exaggeration. The commanders of the Dravan Union called them lies. But the soldiers who had been there knew the truth. The civilians who had felt the kindness could not forget it. A seed had been planted in the hearts of many, a seed stronger than weapons or fleets. The Battle of Maras did not end the war. The empires continued their struggle, blind to the change that had begun. Yet for the first time in centuries, something new moved among the stars. The galaxy had seen mercy in the middle of destruction. It had seen a different path. The turning point had come, not with the fall of a fleet or the capture of a planet, but with the actions of a small human force that refused to see enemies only people. The story of Maras traveled faster than any fleet. Survivors, travelers, and messengers carried the tale of humans who entered a battlefield to save lives rather than fight. People whispered it in stations, trading posts, and quiet corners of space. For many, it seemed impossible. How could a small species change anything in a galaxy locked in endless war? In the Orani League, some officers began to question what they had learned. One young captain, Arlen, had witnessed human actions during the rescue. He had always believed that strength alone was the path to order, but what he saw made him pause. Humans did not have the largest fleet or the strongest weapons, yet they had accomplished something no Orani officer had ever achieved. They had united enemies for a moment, not with force, but with kindness. Across the border, in the Dravan Union, whispers were similar. A pilot named Sira returned from a mission to find civilians saved by humans. Her comrades called her naive for trusting them, but she could not forget how both Orani and Draven children had smiled for the first time in months aboard a human vessel. She began to wonder if there was a path besides endless fighting, a way to think that did not begin and end with war. Humans continued their work without seeking fame. They traveled from system to system, focusing on rebuilding stations, delivering supplies, and teaching communities how to protect themselves in safe ways. They offered training for emergency navigation, communication, and basic repairs. They never demanded loyalty, never claimed land, never forced agreements. Their goal was simple: keep people alive, and show that cooperation could exist even in the darkest places. Everywhere humans went, their idea spread. It began quietly, almost unnoticed. Civilians who had been rescued told their families and neighbors about the humans. Soldiers who had survived on human ships shared their experiences with friends and commanders. Even small factions of both alliances began to question the endless battles that had shaped their lives. Could there be another way? In one instance, a border station caught fire during a skirmish between Orani and Draven patrols. Normally, the two sides would have watched each other fall in silence. But humans arrived and opened communication channels to both factions. They guided firefighting drones and coordinated rescue teams without taking sides. In a single day, hundreds were saved. Both the Orani and Draven crews involved began to speak of humans not as weak children, but as leaders in a way that had nothing to do with weapons. The spread of this idea was subtle, but powerful. Soldiers began to hesitate before taking actions that could harm civilians. Commanders started listening to reports of human interventions. Even fleets on distant missions altered their plans when they realized humans might be nearby, not as enemies, but as a force of influence. Humans had no power to demand obedience, but the galaxy followed them because they offered hope. This hope was something new. In a galaxy dominated by fear, destruction, and centuries of inherited hate, hope was rare. Humans offered a vision that had never been considered. They showed that life could be protected even when empires fought endlessly. They showed that cooperation could exist even when it seemed impossible. Some skeptics remained. Many in the League and the Union still dismissed humans as irrelevant. They believed that in time, humans would be forced to choose sides or be destroyed. Yet even the skeptics could not erase the stories that traveled faster than fleets, faster than messages from commanders, faster than warnings of war. Stories of humans saving lives, sharing resources, and treating everyone as equal could not be silenced. For the first time, a new pattern began to emerge. Communities began to organize themselves, inspired by humans. Neutral worlds created shelters and communication networks. Small factions of both alliances refused to follow orders that would harm civilians unnecessarily. Even some leaders secretly studied the ways humans approached conflict, trying to understand how a species so small could make such a large impact. The humans themselves continued without celebrating. They did not announce their successes, nor did they demand attention. They moved quietly, spreading skills and ideas wherever they could. Yet their presence created ripples across the galaxy. A single act of kindness became a lesson. A small rescue became a story of courage and ingenuity. Every effort added to the growing belief that the war did not have to be endless. By the time fleets once focused entirely on destruction noticed the pattern, humans had already become something more than a small species in the corner of space. They had become symbols. Symbols of an idea that life could matter more than victory. That strategy could be about care as much as strength. That the galaxy could change if enough people believed in a different way of thinking. And so, quietly, the idea spread. Humans had entered the galaxy unnoticed. Now, they were planting seeds that no weapon, no fleet, and no battle could erase. The war had continued for centuries, but the first cracks in its foundation had begun. Even as humans moved quietly through the galaxy, spreading their ideas of care and cooperation, not everyone welcomed them. Some leaders and soldiers in both the Orani League and the Draven Union saw humans as a threat. They were too different, too small, and too unpredictable. They could not be controlled, and that frightened those who believed in power above all else. In the Orani League, high-ranking officers whispered about the human problem. They believed the humans were weakening the soldiers' discipline. The stories of kindness, rescue, and unity confused young officers who had been trained to value victory over compassion. Some commanders tried to ban discussions of humans, claiming that attention to such a small species would harm morale. Yet no order could erase the memory of lives saved by human ships, and no command could silence the hope that had begun to spread. The Draven Union responded differently. They saw humans as soft and foolish, a species that could not survive in a universe ruled by strength. Union leaders tried to challenge the humans directly, sending small fleets to intercept them. They believed that showing power would force humans to leave, or at least follow one side. But the humans never fought to conquer. They focused on rescue and guidance, avoiding battles that could harm civilians. Each failed attack made the humans' reputation stronger. Some soldiers on both sides began to question their orders. They had been taught to fight without mercy, yet they had seen humans act without fear, saving lives from both empires. How could destruction be the only answer when humans showed another way? In some cases, fleets hesitated, unsure whether to follow commands that could harm people already under human protection. This hesitation, small at first, began to spread. The first real test came in the Galen sector. A mining colony had become a battlefield when Orani and Draven forces clashed over valuable resources. Both fleets were poised to destroy the other, leaving civilians trapped on the surface. The humans arrived as usual, their ships small but numerous in courage. They sent messages to both sides, not demanding surrender, but offering coordination to evacuate the people safely. Some commanders ignored the humans and fired anyway. Others hesitated. Their hesitation allowed more civilians to escape than either side had expected. Humans moved quickly, guiding the survivors to orbiting shelters and providing medical care. Even soldiers who had been ordered to attack found themselves assisting, unable to watch life being destroyed when it could be saved. After the battle, stories spread quickly. Soldiers returned to their fleets and stations talking about humans who had arrived in the middle of destruction and refused to take sides. They had saved lives without bias, without claiming victory, and without asking for reward. These stories challenged old beliefs. Could it be that war was not the only way to measure strength? Could strategy include protection instead of only attack in response? Some factions tried to resist this new influence. Certain Orani commanders demanded strict obedience to old rules. Draven officers issued harsh punishments for those who hesitated in battle. They believed that any cooperation with humans weakened their empires. Yet every attempt to suppress the idea only made it stronger. Soldiers who had seen human actions firsthand refused to forget. Civilians who had been rescued told their stories again and again. The message of hope could not be silenced. Small councils and groups of soldiers began to secretly study human methods. They noticed how humans planned for safety, how they thought creatively, and how they trusted one another. These councils taught their members that strength was not only in firepower but also in cleverness, unity, and care. Slowly, the resistance to humans shifted. Some leaders realized that ignoring humans meant ignoring a force that could inspire entire fleets. Even so, challenges remained. Some empires continued their endless fights, sending large fleets to enforce control. Humans could not stop every battle. They were still small and outnumbered. But wherever they appeared, they left an influence no army could erase. Soldiers began to ask questions. Civilians began to hope. Leaders began to notice that a different path might be possible. By the end of the Galen sector conflict, the galaxy had seen something it had never seen before. Humans had entered as a quiet presence, but their influence had grown beyond their size. They had shown that courage could include kindness. They had shown that strength could include care. They had planted the beginnings of a new way of thinking, one that even the most stubborn leaders could no longer ignore. Resistance to humans had slowed their progress in some areas, but it had not stopped it. The smallest acts of mercy had spread faster than fleets. The idea that life mattered above all else had moved like a wave through soldiers, civilians, and even reluctant commanders. Humans had changed the game without firing a single shot in anger. The galaxy was beginning to see that the endless war could be questioned. The humans had shown that power alone was not the answer. That belief had begun to challenge centuries of tradition, and for the first time, some leaders could imagine a future where the cycle of war might be broken. The galaxy had changed. It was not yet at peace, and the great fleets of the Orani League and the Draven Union still faced one another across battle lines. Yet everywhere humans had traveled, something new had begun to grow. Soldiers questioned old orders, civilians believed in hope, and leaders whispered about possibilities they had never considered. Humans themselves continued quietly, never seeking credit. Their fleets remained small, their ships simple, yet their influence spread like sunlight through the darkness. They were no longer just a species among many. They were symbols of a new way of thinking, a living example that courage could include care, and strategy could include protection. In the neutral systems, humans worked to establish safe zones. These zones were not military bases. They were places where life could exist without fear. Schools, farms, and workshops were rebuilt. Communities of Orani and Draven citizens, once enemies, began to live side by side. Humans taught communication, problem-solving, and cooperation. Slowly, distrust began to fade, replaced by understanding. One such zone became the center of a remarkable event. A small colony on the planet Lysera had been caught between fleets for decades. Both the Orani and Draven had claimed control at different times, leaving the planet in a constant state of fear. When humans arrived, they offered the leaders of both sides a simple proposal. They would not take the planet, they would not favor one side, but they would help the people survive. The Orani officer in charge and the Draven commander hesitated at first. They had been enemies for generations. Yet the humans insisted on neutrality and fairness. The civilians were evacuated to secure shelters, crops were protected, and medical facilities were established. The humans guided the two commanders to see that working together could save lives rather than destroy them. By the end of the month, the two commanders were speaking to each other without hostility. They coordinated resources and even shared intelligence to keep the colony safe. This cooperation was unheard of, and word of it spread quickly. Other systems watched closely, realizing that humans had created something that neither strength nor numbers could achieve alone. In distant fleets, young soldiers began to question their orders. Could it be that victory did not always mean destruction? Could strength include mercy? These questions, once unthinkable, now circulated quietly among the ranks. Human examples of cooperation, courage, and clever strategy had planted seeds of thought no officer could entirely erase. Even the leaders of the great alliances could no longer ignore the impact of humans. Some continued to dismiss them as insignificant, but others began to study their methods. They noticed that humans did not rely on sheer force. They relied on observation, adaptation, and creativity. They trusted one another and treated life as valuable. Leaders realized that humans had achieved influence greater than many fleets without firing a single shot in anger. The turning point came during the Battle of the Karen Belt. It was expected to be one of the fiercest clashes in decades. Yet human ships arrived, not to fight, but to guide evacuations and protect neutral stations. Soldiers from both sides paused to allow the rescue efforts to continue. Civilians were brought to safety, and damaged vessels were repaired wherever possible. The battle continued, but its scale of destruction was far smaller than expected. When the battle ended, commanders from both alliances gathered secretly. They spoke of humans with a mixture of awe and concern. "They have changed the rules," one said. "They fight differently, yet they have won something far greater than victory in battle," another replied. Human actions had shown that strength alone was not the measure of power. Ideas, courage, and care could achieve results fleets could never hope to reach. Humans had changed the game without seeking war. They had shown that it was possible to influence both sides, to inspire soldiers, and to protect civilians even in the midst of conflict. They had shown that hope could exist in a galaxy defined by fear. Their actions planted the possibility of a future where the endless war might finally end. As humans continued their journeys, the galaxy watched and learned. Soldiers hesitated less out of fear and more out of choice. Civilians no longer saw only destruction but the possibility of safety and cooperation. Leaders began to realize that the galaxy could be governed not only by strength but by wisdom, empathy, and cleverness. By the time humans returned to their home systems, they were no longer unnoticed. Their journeys, small as they seemed at first, had altered the course of the galaxy. They had proven that a species does not need to dominate to be powerful. Ideas and actions could change minds, hearts, and entire civilizations. The endless war had not ended yet, but it would never be the same. Humans had shown the galaxy that even in the darkest times, courage could include kindness. Strategy could include protection. And one species, no matter how small, could change the game for all. The galaxy had begun to hope again, and humans were the reason.